Commissioners, we are good to go?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. We are recording, yes?
Yep.
Okay, good. Good morning, everybody. The time is 10:32, and I call the June 29th, 2023 Planning Board meeting to order. We are joined today with a complete complement of board members. We have Vice Chair Bailey.
Morning.
Commissioner Washington.
Good morning.
Commissioner Dorner. And Commissioner Giraldo.
Good morning.
I'm Chair Shapiro. Please note that the deadline for all participant pre-registration for all submission of materials and exhibits was 12 noon on the Tuesday before this planning board meeting. Registered speakers may join the meeting with a link provided in the email provided by the planning board office or listen by phone by utilizing the call-in number provided in the email. Of course, anyone may tune in to watch the planning board meeting via live stream. And if you wish to speak or become a person of record, you may use our online web form, which you'll see on the screen before you. In addition to our commissioners, we are joined by David Warner, our principal counsel. We have Jessica Jones, our planning board administrator, Joe Parsons, who is our senior technical hearing writer, James Hunt, division chief of the Development Review Division. Just popped on, Mr. Hunt, good to see you. I like your name on the screen. We have staff member Kenneth Flanagan and Ryan Kreiner helping assist technology behind the scenes. Before we move on, the order of cases we're going to go through today will follow the normal order with the exception of the regular agenda items. We're going to do items 6, then 5, then 7. 6, 5, 7. Before we move on, I'm going to turn to our principal counsel, David Warner, who is going to introduce a new member of our legal team. Take it away, Mr. Warner.
Thank you, Chair Shapiro. Yes, David Warner, principal counsel. Very excited to introduce our new attorney in our office, Laura Tellerico. She comes to us from the firm of Miles and Stockbridge and has been practicing law for almost 6 years now. She's a graduate of the University of Maryland Law School and also has an undergrad in economics and French from Goucher. She's served as a circuit court law clerk in the past with the county attorney's office, the US EPA, the Maryland Attorney General's office. Before law school, she taught English here and in China. So we're really excited to have someone with such a wealth of experience and most importantly, a real interest in Prince George's County and the commission. Welcome, Laura.
Thanks, David. Hello, everyone. Happy to be here at the commission and look forward to working with you all.
Welcome.
Thank you, Laura.
Welcome.
Welcome. Glad that we have another economics background on here. Hopefully you like Posner and that style of wise. And
Welcome to you.
Thanks, everyone.
Welcome, welcome. So everybody, we've got a new attorney and let the hazing begin.
We've already started.
Good, excellent. So Laura, thank you very much. Nice to meet you. Looking forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Before we move on, I want to share a bit of very good news. You may have read about this, and Commissioner Dorner reminded us of this as well. The commission has received a $25 million RAISE grant, which stands for something I don't know, but it's related to infrastructure, and the money is going to go to both Prince George's and Montgomery counties, the commission overall, to help improve our trail systems. There's a whole bunch of specific projects tied to it, but it's a huge, huge boost for us. And we're going to see a whole lot more connectivity amongst trails and acceleration of some of our signature projects, such as the Central Avenue Connector Trail and things like that. So very, very exciting news, and you'll hear more about that as we move along.
Great.
Yeah, wonderful to hear.
Today's things were rebuilding American infrastructure with sustainability and equity.
Thank you. That was it.
That's what you were saying.
Exactly. That's what I meant to say. Exactly. Thank you, Kristen. So just good news to share for the public and for us. And with that, why don't we move on to our first action item. First item is a motion. I would look for a motion to approve the draft minutes of June 22nd, 2023.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Got a motion by Vice Chair Bailey, a second by Commissioner Washington. Discussion. I'll call the roll. Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Washington.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 5-0. Next, item 3C on our agenda. This is County Planning Division, Subtitle 25 update. We have Megan Reiser who's going to give the briefing, and we'll turn it over to staff. Take it away, Ms.
Good morning. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. My name is Megan Reiser with the Environmental Planning Section, here to provide a briefing on the upcoming Subtitle 25 update. Here with me today are Kim Finch, who is my co-lead on the project, as well as Tom Burke, Supervisor of the Environmental Planning Section, and Katina Scholars, our Countywide Planning Division Chief. Next slide, please. Updates to our local ordinances are needed to address the required program components mandated by the recently passed state bills, House Bill 723 and identical Senate Bill 526, known as the Natural Resources, Forest Preservation and Retention Act. These bills require significant changes to our current code by July 1st, 2024. Next slide, please. In addition to updating Subtitle 25 to address the mandated requirements, we anticipate making additional revisions to address issues that have been identified over the years since our last major update, which was done in 2010. The changes will address Plan 2035 and the Climate Action Plan, clean up the code, and address the many interests within the county. Next slide, please. Today, we would like to discuss Subtitle 25, a brief history of the ordinances, provide an overview and summary of the mandated changes, discuss the impacts of the bill on the county, review the timeline, and identify next steps. Next slide, please. Subtitle 25 includes 3 divisions. Division 1 contains general regulations regarding trees and rights-of-way and is mainly implemented by the Department of Public Works and Transportation. Division 2 is the Woodland and Wildlife Habitat Conservation Ordinance that you may be most familiar with through tree conservation plans. Division 3 is the Tree Canopy Cover Ordinance that you may also be familiar with through landscape plans. We anticipate updates to both Division 2 and Division 3. Next slide, please. Prince George's County adopted a local woodland conservation program in 1989, effective January 1st, 1990. Prior to the state enacting the Forest Conservation Act in 1991, which required all jurisdictions to create and implement local programs by 1993. There have been updates to the state requirements over the years that we have adopted along the way, but our most recent overhaul of Subtitle 25 was done in 2010, which was when our local tree canopy cover requirements were enacted. Next slide, please. Actually, I think we're behind one.
Are you on the right slide, Megan? Is that good?
Next slide. Okay, great. Now I will outline the major changes mandated by the bills. An update to the forest replacement requirements is probably the biggest change. The goal of this requirement is for jurisdictions to show no net loss of forest. Actually, if you could go back a slide.
Is that the one?
No, the previous slide, slide 7. There we go. Perfect. Thank you. So the goal of the requirements is for jurisdictions to show no net loss of forest and to strive for an overall increase. The bills allow flexibility in how jurisdictions can approach this requirement. They outline the removal of woodland conservation thresholds for calculation purposes and, with some exceptions, requires one-to-one replacement. In other words, planting is to be provided an equal amount for woodland approved to be removed. Local jurisdictions may create their own programs to meet these requirements as long as it can be demonstrated that the county will achieve no net loss. Unless otherwise directed, staff anticipates implementing an alternative program, as the state program is not a one-size-fits-all approach. We believe updating our current requirements will be sufficient to achieve no net loss while allowing us to consider the nuances of other local codes, programs, and plan goals. Our next steps will be to run scenarios across many different application types, including rural agriculture, single-family lots, commercial, multifamily, mixed-use projects. Under these evaluations, we will need to look at projects that are both large and small, wooded and unwooded, in order to get an accurate representation. Next slide, please.
There's a bit of a lag on our side, so take your time.
Okay.
Fill the slide.
Okay, great. Another change involves planting requirements within stream buffers. The bills specifically call out intermittent and perennial streams for required planting. If the buffers are currently wooded, they are to remain wooded, and if they are not already wooded, they will be required to be planted. While this requirement for forested stream buffers would not technically involve an update to our local stream buffer regulations in the county, we plan to more closely evaluate the differences and see if there may be opportunity to marry the two requirements for practical implementation purposes. Next slide, please. Notification and public comments are brand new requirements. You are probably most familiar with tree conservation plans that accompany development review cases, but there are also what we refer to as standalone tree conservation plans. These are plans that are needed for permitting and are not required to go through the entitlement process. These plans are approved at the planning director level and then go straight to permit. The tree conservation plans that accompany development review cases have notice as part of their cases. However, we do not currently require any notice to adjacent property owners, nor do we have a process for public comment on standalone tree conservation plans currently. The bills outline certain criteria that trigger the new notice and public comment period, and we anticipate that the majority of plans will require both moving forward. Next slide, please. Written findings for clearing of priority forest is another new requirement. I'm sure you are familiar with the variance findings for the removal of specimen trees, and likewise the written findings required for impacts to regulated environmental features and primary management area in our local code. This process is anticipated to follow something similar to our PMA written findings for proposed impacts. The Maryland Department of Natural Resources is to provide the criteria for the written findings in an updated state forest conservation manual, and we plan to adopt accordingly. Next slide, please. An expansion of the already defined priority forest is included in the bills. I won't go into detail, but the added criteria are listed here for your reference. Based on preliminary mapping, priority forest covers the majority of the county and includes forests in all areas of the county, priority funding areas, centers, as well as rural areas of the county. Next slide, please. The bills require allowance for judicial review. You may be aware of some recent tree conservation plans that have been appealed. While appeals have been relatively few and far between, this would put some guardrails on the process. This also ties back to the notification and public comment component of the updates, and that the community should be more aware of proposed TCPs moving forward and will be required to petition for judicial review in a timely manner. Next slide, please.
Give us 1 sec.
There are some new exemptions from the program that should be noted, including stream restoration projects, stormwater management maintenance, forest management, and the construction of certain government facilities, such as the FBI building. Next slide, please. Grandfathering was included in the changes. Projects that are vested before the effective date may not be subject to the new requirements, and any revision to a plan or permit where the limits of disturbance remain unaltered also may not be subject to the new requirements. Next slide, please. And the last change we would like to outline for you involves woodland conservation banking. You may recall the state's Tree Solutions Now Act of 2021, which, among other things, halted the creation of offsite woodland conservation banks established with retention and only allowed the creation of banks using planting credits. The current bills allow for banks with retention credits to resume. However, there were some guardrails added to their use. Moving forward, only 50% of a site's requirement can be met with retention credits, and newly established banks using retention must be located in areas of priority forest. Next slide, please. We believe that the impacts of the bills on the county will have a very positive effect on the environment by furthering the goals of our local plan. However, there are anticipated challenges as well, including additional costs to all development within the county, as well as added program costs for implementation. Next slide, please. The Maryland Department of Natural Resources has been tasked with issuing procedures by which local programs will be evaluated for no net loss and for an update to the state's technical manual. We are on a very tight timeline for this proposed legislative update with an effective date of July 1st, 2024. Staff is recommending the alternative amendment option. If an alternative program is not adopted, then the new standard replacement requirements will need to be implemented by default. The goal of an alternative program is to demonstrate no net loss while allowing flexibility to address our local program goals, such as maintaining growth in our Plan 2035 centers. Next slide, please. Again, we are on a very tight time frame. This briefing is our first step to be followed by a briefing for the council and public and stakeholder engagement. We anticipate a bill being introduced by the council chairman at the request of the planning board in the February to March timeframe next year. And we will simultaneously be working on an update to our environmental technical manual so that once the legislation is passed and the new requirements are set, we will have the tools on hand to implement. Next slide, please. This concludes staff's presentation, and our team welcomes any questions you may have.
Great.
Thank you, Ms. Reisner. Nice job. Questions for staff? I have one. If we could, I'm sorry, go ahead, Will.
On slide, I think it was slide 7, there was an option for alternative program for reforestation. And you mentioned in the timeline that you all are developing out that option to alternative programs potentially. So what I wanted to ask about is something kind of different that we haven't thought about before in some cases. One thing that kind of occurred to me was in our county where we have metro-oriented places, we're not going to have necessarily like within the vicinity of certain developments the ability to do the one-for-one replacement. So in the past, we've done like offsite developments and sort of other kind of donations to tree banks. What I was thinking about was more on the next slide, actually, on the alternative program on slide 8, where you're talking about the stream buffers, because I noticed later on there was an exception for stream restorations, but it seems like everything is focused on physical trees that would be like the typical definition of sort of like vegetation. And if we go down to like Bladensburg, there's been a huge restoration of the watershed area around there with vegetation that's not terrestrial, like sitting on the land, but is aquatic and helping to clean up the river. And then we've also got into things that are non-tree or plant-based with like oysters and mussels kind of in the river. And for the first time in 50 years, in another week from now, people are going to be able to swim in the Anacostia legally, which I don't know if I would want to do that quite yet, but we're getting there. And it just sort of occurred to me, like, have you all thought about maybe in this alternative program, some restoration of the aquatic plant life, or maybe cleanups of the streams, not just the buffers themselves, but like more looking at how we could do the actual rivers themselves. So if we're running out of space for the trees, then we focus in on other areas that might be impacted by projects or just make for nicer kind of like enjoyable usage of nature around our county.
So I guess the first point would be there will likely be lower thresholds in our centers. So like 1/4 to 1, 1/2 to 1, something like that. And then 1 to 1 outside of centers. That's something that we're looking at. Also for alternative credits, in the state bill, there were things established for stormwater management credits if the project is going above and beyond what is required by law, things like that. And there are also credits for individual trees. Tree canopy seems to be a big part of this bill. So we're still trying to figure out what would be appropriate to put in the woodland conservation ordinance and what would be appropriate to put in the tree canopy cover requirements, but to look at it as a whole project with water quality in mind, especially adjacent to these streams.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be really important that we think about that actively, and we're not just thinking about the trees, and we're not giving sort of a lesser requirement to more metro-oriented development. Like, I want to see that development and certainly prioritize it, but maybe like if we have a lower requirement, it's not one for one, then that's offset by off-site kind of improvements or assistance, because like they're going to have to do stormwater management, they're going to have to do those things, and if they're going to be cutting down tree canopy in those areas, then having off-site but like very associated kind of like improvements would be useful. And I know that our rivers are really, the branches that feed into the Anacostia are extremely polluted. There's trash, like I go off the bike trails and we'll sit on rocks with my kids, and like we throw rocks into the rivers and we watch the rivers, and I look around, there's like glass and there's plastic and other stuff around there, and just not much vegetation or really like fish life and stuff or marine life kind of in those streams that certainly could be there. There's no reason why we couldn't prioritize that, and maybe we should think about a balance of being flexible and figure. And I don't know the exact way to write it down, in codifying it, but having a balance of using aquatic or other marine life as offsets to the trees, because they serve the same kind of purpose, even though if it's not the same thing, just in a slightly different way, and can help improve our nature around here.
Mr. Dorn, this is Katina Scholars. We do, our current ordinance actually does have a provision for credit for habitat enhancement in lieu as part of meeting the woodland conservation requirement. And it has been very rarely used. And one of the reasons it has been rarely used because the credit isn't a one-to-one credit. It's a lower credit requirement. We will go back section of the code and to enhance it and give more clarity to it, and maybe it would encourage developers or applicants to use it more, and possibly through the technical manual could give some examples. But we have to have a lot of discussion with DNR as to make it clear what can and can't be done for that. But we do have something there right now. I had to give a nod to our current ordinance because that the update in 2010 really did open up the door to a lot of options of other options of meeting woodland conservation ordinance, and that was one of them. It's just that some of them are rarely used by the applicants. We just need to find a way to encourage them to use those other options more.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So yeah, if you can embark on those discussions with DNR to kind of figure out how do we encourage that, because that would be really nice to start to see, just like a more well-rounded discussion of how we preserve our county and the environment around it that we cherish a lot.
Right. Thank you for that. I have a question. If you can go to slide 18, just a question about the timeline. And one of the items that you had was around from October to January, the stakeholder discussions. Can you give me a sense of the flavor of that? When you say work with all interested parties, how is that going to proceed?
So we envision having meetings with the Maryland Building Industry Association, environmental groups, neighborhoods, things like that. Trying to get the word out, get an understanding of what the concerns are in the community and from the various viewpoints.
Right, because I mean, it's stating the obvious, but the more work that's done there, then when there's a bill introduced, it's going to be a bill that has all the appropriate folks already on board. That's the perfect world that we're aspiring to, I'm sure.
That is our goal, yes.
Right. So, and I wonder if there's perhaps if the commissioners and I could see what the sort of stakeholder engagement plan is, then we might have some thoughts about that, and we may be able to be helpful with it too.
Okay, great. Thank you. We will do that.
Sure. Appreciate that. Any other questions, commissioners? Okay, thank you all very much. This is just a briefing. The purpose of this was to talk through the changes and how the staff's going to proceed. I think you've done a great job explaining it to us, and we look forward to hearing more about it as you move along. Thank you very much. All right, next item on our agenda is the consent agenda. I believe that there's an item that staff wants us to take off the consent agenda. Mr. Hunt, you have something for us? You're on mute, Mr. Hunt.
No.
Take your time, but you're actually, your microphone says you're not on mute, but we can't hear you.
Is that better?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Sorry about that. Okay. James Hunt with the Development Review Division for the record. Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Board, the staff would like to request to remove on the consent agenda, which is going to be, I believe, item 4B, the resolution on that agenda, PGC PB number 2023-77. That's for Discovery District. If you recall, that was on last week's agenda, and we would like to discuss some revisions to the findings and conditions on that resolution. So we would just respectfully request to remove that from the agenda and have that discussion with the board for their review and approval if possible.
Sure. When will that come before us, the discussion, or you want to do that today?
Yes, we can do that today. If the board votes, we can actually have that as a part of the regular agenda if you like, or immediately following this item, or as a first agenda item to be spoken about regarding on the regular agenda if you like.
So we'll take that up as the first item on the regular agenda today. Okay, that's fine. Commissioners, any concerns around that?
No,
Okay.
it's just removing the one resolution, 2023-77, but 67
That's correct.
stays. Okay, you're right. So it's a part of 4B.
Correct. Part of 4B is only number 77.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, so with that, is there anyone else here who wishes to post staff's recommendations for the consent agenda, or any board member, anyone else who has any items they want to discuss? If not, then I would look for a motion to approve the consent agenda with that one change.
Motion to approve consent agenda, adoption of the staff findings and approval of the items on the consent agenda with the deletion of the one indicated by staff.
Second.
A motion by Vice Chair Bailey, a second by Commissioner Washington. Discussion. I'll call the roll. Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Washington.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 5-0. Okay, so now we're up on our regular agenda, and we will, the first item we'll take up is part of item 4B, the resolution that was discussed. And Mr. Hunt, turn it to you and your team.
Thanks again for the record, James Hunt with the Development Review Division. Staff would like to discuss with the Planning Board some revised findings and conditions relevant to the Discovery District resolution. With us today, we have Dominique Lockhart, who's going to go into the specifics on those revisions to that resolution.
Thank you, Ms. Lockhart. Take it away.
Good morning. Doing a sound check?
Yep, we can hear you fine. Thanks for checking.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Again, for the record, I am Dominique Lockhart with the zoning section. The following corrections will be made to the Discovery District resolution as follows. There's a technical correction on pages 5 and 16 that will be revised to state 2 spaces will be located internally in building 1 and 3 spaces will be located externally. This is in relation to the location of the loading spaces. And so those numbers will be switched. On page 33, condition 4.2 will be revised to state design and construct the Campus Drive Trolley Trail, Leonardtown, access enhancement hub number 1 along the south side of Campus Drive to include adding a bus shelter at Rosboro Lane bus stop. If it is not feasible to construct the bus shelter at the Rosboro Lane bus stop due to existing or proposed construction. The bus stop will be constructed at another location mutually approved by the applicant and the City of College Park. On page 33, condition 4.3 will be revised to state, construct a 5-foot sidewalk along the north side, excuse me, along the north side of Norwich Road from the existing sidewalk to Rhode Island Avenue within the City of College Park right-of-way. This will include new ADA pedestrian ramps on the northwest, northeast, and southwest corners of the intersection of Rhode Island Avenue and Norwich Road, and continental crosswalks on the west and north legs of the intersection. On page 34, condition 8B will be revised to eliminate the comma after Campus Drive. On page 35, condition F4 will be revised to state, construct a 5-foot sidewalk along the south side of Norwich Road from Rhode Island Avenue to connect to the new existing sidewalk within the City of College Park right-of-way. This will include new ADA pedestrian ramps on the southwest and southeast corners of the intersection of Norwich Road and Dartmouth Avenue, and a continental crosswalk on the south leg of the intersection. This concludes the corrections to the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lockhart. Just a process question. Excuse my ignorance, Mr. Hunt, because this feels unfamiliar to me. So what's happening?
Again, for the record, James Hunt with the Development Review Division. Staff has provided the Planning Board with a draft resolution on which we've worked with legal on. And in the same time, we've coordinated with the applicant to confirm all the required findings and the conditions that were discussed last week. And what's taken place at this point in time is there are revisions to that draft resolution to make some corrections in here to clarify what actions actually did take place last week during the hearing. And so staff is just clarifying those actions and confirming it in order to get the resolution approved. We have been discussing these revisions with the applicant. The applicant is in agreement with these conditions. We do have an email provided by the applicant, and unfortunately they were not able to register to speak. However, we do have an email from them indicating their agreement.
But essentially, what is before us was the draft resolution. The reason why we're going through this is because the draft resolution that we saw in the record, you're making these limited changes to. That's all that's happening. Okay.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Great. Thanks. Commissioners, any questions for staff?
Yeah, just one question. On the Norwich edits that we have on page 33 and then later on, within there, are we going to put in any of the conditions, the consideration of relocating the street signage from the utility pole to either a stop sign or somewhere else where it can be a little bit more visible? Because that was one of the things that the applicant agreed to and to look into.
Yes, I believe they agreed to look into it, but it wasn't proffered as a condition.
Right, that was my memory of it too, Commissioner Dorner. And I also think there was some issue around whether it was in the state right of way or some of the signage was. I thought there was some issue around that.
Not that.
What I heard is
that was elsewhere. The state right of way was off of Route 1 when I was asking about like the footrest and stuff. This is sitting right next to our bike trail. I rode by it this morning and it reminded me of that I couldn't see the street sign. And it's on just regular county roads right there or city roads, whoever would own them.
So I think where we are in the process, that has not been proffered by the applicant, but I imagine staff can continue to work with them on that.
That sounds fine.
Okay, thank you. So any other questions? So then we're looking for a motion to approve the resolution as amended. Is that correct, Mr. Hunt, Ms. Lockhart?
Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve PGCPB number 2023-77 with the noted adjustments and technical corrections as read into the record by staff.
Second.
A motion by Commissioner Washington, second by Vice Chair Bailey. Discussion? No discussion. I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington,
Vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey,
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner,
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 5-0. Thank you, Ms. Lockhart. Thank you, Mr. Hunt. We will now go to item 6 on our agenda. This is a comprehensive design plan, CDP 0301-01, Kenwood Village. I believe this is a request for a continuance. We have Mr. Shelley, who will be giving the staff comments on this, and then we have Mr. Haller, who's representing the applicant. Mr. Shelley, start with you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Just doing a sound check. Are you able to hear me okay?
You're fine, thanks.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the Planning Board. For the record, I'm Andrew Shelley with the Urban Design section. Item number 6 is Comprehensive Design Plan CDP-0303-01 for Kenwood Village, which seeks to develop 124 single-family detached residential dwelling units. The applicant has requested a 2-week continuance until July 13th, 2023 to work with staff on reviewing the prior comprehensive design plan conditions of approval. The applicant has provided a 45-day extension to the action limit, which now expires on September 19th, 2023. Staff recommends that the Planning Board approve the 2-week continuance, and this would conclude staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shelley. Mr. Haller, anything you want to add?
No, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I want to thank Mr. Shelley for working with us on this, and I think we provided the information that they need to complete the staff report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Haller or for Mr. Shelley? And if there are no questions, I would look for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, move the request for approval for a continuance until July 13th.
Second.
Got a motion by Vice Chair Bailey, a second by Commissioner Washington. Discussion. I'll call the roll. Vice Chair Bailey,
Vote aye.
Commissioner Washington,
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner, Commissioner Giraldo.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Haller. Thank you, Mr. Shelley.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have item 5 on our agenda, DSP 22014 Wood Property. We have Mr. Shelley again, and then Mr. Foreman is representing the applicant. Turn to Mr. Shelley.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Again, just doing another sound check. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you fine.
All right, great. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the Planning Board. For the record, I am Andrew Shelley with the Urban Design section. Item number 5 is detailed site plan DSP-22014 for Wood Property, which seeks to develop 88 single-family attached townhouse dwelling units. As part of the application, the applicant has requested alternative compliance from the requirements of Section 4.10 of the 2010 Prince George's County Landscape Manual. As a matter of housekeeping, the applicant has provided a revised conditions memorandum titled Applicant Exhibit 1 prior to the hearing deadline on June 27, 2023. The revised conditions are agreed upon by staff and the applicant. The associated revised findings will be read into the record by the applicant. Conditions requiring 2 dog parks and standard rooftop decks on all gray wood end units have been removed. Condition 1B was also modified to specify that all end units that are not highly visible shall provide a water table. The water table provided could then be constructed of either brick or stone instead of just brick. Based on evaluation and analysis, Urban Design staff recommend that the Planning Board adopt the findings of this report and approve detailed site plan DSP-22014, alternative compliance AC-23006, and type 2 tree conservation plan TCP2-002-2022-01, subject to the recommended conditions of approval within the technical staff report and the revised conditions provided by the applicant and agreed upon by staff and applicant exhibit 1, along with the revised findings as read into the record by the applicant. This would conclude staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shelley. Questions for Mr. Shelley before we turn to Mr. Foreman?
I have questions, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So I want to know, what was the rationale for removing the dog parks?
Yes, Commissioner Giraldo. My apologies for not providing that in the presentation. The rationale was that provided The applicant provided dog waste stations in lieu of the dog parks. We had asked for 2 dog parks in 2 smaller portions of the facility of the site plan. I'll allow the applicant to elaborate on that further if they desire. But essentially the areas themselves, due to grading and due to sizing, the applicant and staff agreed that they were too small to provide the associated requested dog parks. So we revised the condition and allowed the applicant to provide dog waste stations in lieu of the dog parks.
But I'm looking at the condition, and it doesn't say anything about the dog waste stations.
Yes, Commissioner Giraldo. So the dog waste stations were provided on the revised plans that were received at the 35-day deadline. So because they were provided on the revised plans received at that deadline, we did not condition the dog waste stations.
I'm not sure.
Geraldo, why don't we talk to Mr. Foreman about it, and maybe they're more than willing to proffer that as a condition. We can see where they go with this.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Shelley.
Thank you, Mr. Giraldo.
Any other questions for staff? If not, I'll turn to Mr. Foreman. Floor is yours.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Nate Foreman here on behalf of the applicant. I'm with the offices of O'Malley, Miles, Nyland, and Gilmore in Greenbelt. With me this morning, I have my colleague, Bill Shipp. I have our engineers, Amy Summer and Phil Hughes. And I have our home builder with us, Bobby Varner, and I believe the applicant, due to a scheduling error, wasn't able to get the link in time, but he is watching at home. I do want to say that we want to thank staff for their work on this matter, and that we appreciate all the negotiations back and forth, and that we do agree to the revised conditions. Before I go into the revised findings, I think the issue that is at hand is about dog parks. So I'd be more than happy to answer that question by the Commissioner Giraldo right now. So we had gone through the process and had designed the site as you see it, and we actually weren't even approached or asked about providing dog parks until we saw the staff report 2 weeks ago. And at that point, we thought there was going to be, there was going to be a lot of changes we would have had to make to the site in terms of grading, open space areas, stormwater management, and even the location of the dog parks in association with, residential lots. Since, I don't believe everybody is interested in having a dog park in their backyard. So we weren't sure, and given the late instances of this request, we just weren't able to accommodate it. However, as Mr. Shelley did mention, as we even started the process, we did try to accommodate dog owners, because we know that is a very important issue with the commissioners, and we weren't just trying to, neglect those members of the family. So that's why we included the dog waste stations on the revised plan to ensure that there was some amenities for dog owners in the area.
So it's on the plan, but it's not part of any of the conditions. So that's my concern. So are you proffering that you're going to put the dog waste stations?
It's my understanding that, Commissioner, that since they're on the plan, we have to construct them. But I believe if it makes it easier, we can proffer. Mr. Hunt?
For the record, James Hunt with the Development Review Division. Since the dog waste stations are located on the plan, then the applicant would have to provide them. However, if they were not a part of the plan, and we would then would look to the condition, we can understand the condition being added in there, because it would not be located, it's not located on the plan, because what's being reviewed is the detailed site plan itself. So since right now those dog waste stations are included on the plan, then there's at this point, staff does not think it's necessary to require the condition in there, because the applicant would have to comply with the approved detailed site plan.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hunt. I have one other question for Mr. I understand with the dog waste stations, are you making any provision for water for the for the dog owners in the project, in the development?
Not currently at this time. I think we had talked about it. We weren't exactly sure how that would work from a utility standpoint, since we never actually envisioned having piping or anything for the dogs to receive water. So we're not sure if that would impact our HPA or our findings from WSSC. So unfortunately, I just don't think we were able to accommodate anything more than the dog waste stations at this time.
Okay.
But we certainly hear you loud and clear, Commissioner Geraldo, going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I consider it not only that for the homeowners, but it's also a matter of health and safety as well to have these dog parks. So, but thank you.
Thank you.
I have no further questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Foreman, you can continue.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And if it is appropriate, I would like to read the revised findings into the record, which would align with the revised conditions that we are in agreement with.
And before you do that, I just want to, for the public, this is actually an evidentiary hearing in this case, which would require those intending to provide testimony to take an oath. I'm not sure we're actually going to have anyone to provide testimony. There's nobody who signed up in opposition. I'm not sure we need to hear from any of members of your team. If they do, I'll need to swear them in. So that's just for the public to know. And Mr. Foreman, you can continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I'm sorry. I should have brought that up, that my members of the team are here to answer any questions, but they're not, otherwise they're going to just, listen. On page 6, under architecture, we are going to 5 lines from the bottom of that paragraph. Pardon me. Where it says conditions have been provided in the recommendation section of this technical staff report for all end units, and that we would like to add that are not high visibility, and then to continue to have a water table constructed with brick or, and then we'd like to add stone on all side elevations, and for each end unit model to have additional standard features. We also would request the deletion of the next sentence or portions of the next sentence, including the Graywood model end units shall have standard rooftop decks. So that is one revision. Turning to page 8, third paragraph down, we would like that paragraph to read, while not a recreation facility, we want to add, the applicant is proposing dog waste stations throughout the development as an additional community amenity, period, staff, find, and then to delete that the community would benefit from dog park facilities in addition to, so that portion was deleted. And now we go back to what was originally there. The proposed dog waste stations, sorry, I had to do that.
Take your time, Mr. Foreman.
Find the proposed dog waste stations, including satisfactory, given that a dog park would not be feasible or practicable given the relatively small size of the development and lack of available space, period. And then to delete, therefore, a condition has been provided for the applicant to install 2 on-site dog parks. Each dog park shall include a fenced grass area and a dog fountain. The locations of these dog parks shall be on parcels G and P. So turning to the next revision, we are on the top of page 17 of the staff report.
Excuse me, Chair Shapiro?
Yes, Mr. Warner.
David Warner, Principal Counsel. I'm having a hard time following these changes that Nate's suggesting be made to the findings in our staff report. Were any of these submitted in writing, or is this just being done right now?
Mr. Warner, yes, these were submitted to Mr. Shelley yesterday. So I'm not sure if we can bring them up to go over them, or. how this would be done in a virtual world.
Hold on one sec, Mr. Foreman. So, Mr. Shelley, Mr. Hunt, how should we proceed on this, given Mr. Warner's concerns, which I think are echoed a bit with my colleagues?
For the record, James Hunt, again, with the Development Review Division. Since these were submitted after the 12 noon deadline, in order to be considered by the planning board, they would have to be read into the record by the applicant at this point. And Mr. Shelley, I believe he has, we reviewed it on our end. I think we've agreed to them. I think we're okay with those revisions, but I wanted to kind of confirm with him as well. But I'll leave it to Mr.
Yeah, let me suggest, Mr. Hunt, that following our procedures, they need to be read into the record. I don't think there's anything that stops us from having the written materials that were submitted even after the deadline as a backup to us, so we can help track what's going on.
Yeah, I agree, Mr. Chair.
So we'll look to do that in the future then.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I don't have any problem from a legal point of view with changes being read into the record as Mr. Foreman is doing. I just couldn't follow him personally, so I just want to make sure the planning board's able to follow his changes.
And I apologize, and it is difficult to, edit verbally these documents. Essentially, the overall point of it is to remove references to the dog parks and the requirements that end units that are not high visibility shall have a water table constructed with brick or stone on all side elevations. And then to remove, all gray wood model end units having standard rooftop decks. It's sort of where those are mentioned, because those were the conditions we're getting rid of, sort of just removing those findings from the record or from the staff report.
Mr. Warner, I have a legal question. So I understand that they can't be formally submitted in the record because they didn't meet the Tuesday deadline, but can the board itself admit it in the board exhibit, just so that whatever is said can be copied verbatim what's written?
Well, David Warner, Principal Counsel, that's not been our practice. But I think, at least to the extent that Nate Foreman is reading these into the record, certainly we have the backup to, help us understand what he intended to say. I assume it's not something any different than what he's saying. So if he misses a word here or there, we can certainly correct it to make it accurate. It's just basically testimony, and testimony gets reflected into our eventual resolution. And so unless there's something completely different that he thinks that he wants in the record that he's not going to talk about, we should be fine. Without accepting the document into the record, since we don't do that afternoon on Tuesdays.
But I think I'm trying to make a distinction between accepting the document into the record, which we are not going to do.
Right.
And using the document that Mr. Shelley has as a backup for us so we can help make sense of things. So if Mr. Shelley can share his screen, then as Mr. Foreman is going through what he's going through and verbally entering it into a record, then we're actually looking at something.
The board's fine with that. That's fine.
Okay.
That would help.
Okay. Yeah. So, Mr. Shelley, you can do that?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Again, for the record, Andrew Shelley with the Urban Design section. From the technical support team, I will need the technical support team to make me a presenter, as I'm not able to share my screen.
It appears that I was also made a presenter too. Okay, Mr. Shelley, that's probably better.
Mr. Chair, would you like Mr. Foreman to start over from the beginning or continue?
Yeah.
Okay.
Have him start from the beginning.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, so starting from the beginning on page 6, we see under the architecture, the words in bold are added, and then the words stricken through will be deleted. So that way, yeah, thank you for zooming in. The conditions have been provided in the recommendation section of this technical staff report for all end units that are not high visibility to have a water table constructed with brick or stone on all side elevations, and for each end unit model to have additional standard features. We also will be propose deleting the Graywood model end units shall have standard rooftop decks. Turning to page 8. Thank you. Oh, a little bit too far right there. We would like this paragraph to, should I read the deletions or just the inclusions, or how we'd like it to be finally? I guess that's sort of the question I have for the board.
But I think the key is that you need to read into the record the changes. So that has to happen. We have this as a backup to help us make sense of it. So I think you need to read all the changes into the record to make it official.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So we would like this paragraph to include and also to delete. Well, while not a recreation facility, the applicant is proposing dog waste stations throughout the development as an additional community amenity. Period. Staff find, and now we would like the next phrase to be deleted, that the community would benefit from dog park facilities in addition to, and now we'd like to actually have it read, the proposed dog waste stations satisfactory given that a dog park would not be feasible or practicable given the relatively small size of the development and lack of available space. We would then request deletion of the next sentence. Therefore, a condition has been provided for the applicant to install 2 on-site dog parks. Each dog park shall include a fenced grass area and a dog fountain. The locations of these 2 dog parks, pardon me, shall be on parcels G and P. The next revision is on page 17, please. Thank you. We'd like to delete, staff has added a condition to the recommendation section of this technical staff report to provide 2 dog parks on parcels G and P, each with fencing and a dog water fountain within the development, as it will provide convenient access to the residents of both the northern and southern portions of the development. If you could please go to the next page, page 18. Thank you. We can stop there at the top. I would request that we delete, as previously discussed, staff recommend a condition to provide 2 dog park facilities and stamped concrete at all 4 sitting areas to further enhance the public space amenities.
Mr. Chairman, just for the record, as I noticed this as we were reading, the and stamp concrete for all 4 sitting areas to further enhance the public space amenities should actually remain in the sentence.
Yes,
should remain in.
Yes, it should remain in the staff report.
All right. Mr. Foreman, you concur?
I concur. Yes, I'm in agreement.
Okay.
What is the phrase that should remain? I'm sorry.
And stamped concrete at all 4 sitting areas to further enhance the public space amenities.
Okay.
That's going to stay in.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And a little bit further down that page, please. Oh, thank you. Conditions have been provided in the recommendations section of this technical staff report for all end units, and to include that are not high visibility, to have a water table constructed with brick, and then include the language or stone on all side elevations, and for each end unit model to have additional standard features. We'd then like to delete, Graywood model end units shall have standard rooftop decks, and continue on with the Halston model. Page 19, the next page, please, at the very bottom. As previously discussed, staff recommend architectural improvements for all end units and include the language that are not high visibility, which differ by model type and are provided as conditions in the recommendation section of this technical staff report. And then finally, getting to the last page, page 25 at the top. To delete the dog parks on the second to last line of the first paragraph. And thank you. And with that, I appreciate everyone's patience while we try to read these into the record. And I'm more than happy to answer any questions that the chair or board have, and would request that the board does approve our detailed site plan with the revised findings and the revised conditions as proffered. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, the revised findings and conditions have been read into the record. First of all, Mr. Warner, any concerns about our process?
No, I think the testimony can be reflected in the planning board's findings and the eventual resolution appropriately.
Thank you. So commissioners, you've heard from the applicant. There's nobody signed up to speak on this, so I will close the public hearing portion of this. Any questions or comments under deliberation? And if not, then I would look for a motion.
I have a few questions for Mr. Foreman, just for clarification.
Commissioner Dorner, take it away.
Yeah, just stuff I didn't see necessarily in the staff report. And one is actually on one of the changes. So I saw you're removing the references to the rooftop deck on the Galveston units. Are there any units in that would have rooftop decks or no at this point?
So rooftop decks are going to be available, but we wanted to give the ultimate consumer or the homeowner the option whether they want the rooftop decks or not. It was just the way we read this condition, it was mandatory. And we just thought we would like to provide the engineers some flexibility.
Okay, so kind of related to that, I noticed you don't have any kind of references to solar arrays or as being sort of an option in there. I imagine it might be an option that you offer to your consumers, but I wanted to ask, is the roof going to be built to the structural integrity to allow solar arrays? Because I know sometimes like the sort of slanted roofs that you guys have in there don't support the solar panels. So I just wanted to find out if you were going to be doing that.
Thank you. That's a great question. I would ask Mr. Bobby Varner with Pulte Homes, who may have more information regarding the structural integrity of the homes for solar.
Okay, so we'll probably have to scroll in, and then I think since this is an evidentiary hearing, we may need a second from Mr. Warner or the chair.
So technically the chairs closed the public hearing, but in this case, just in belt and suspenders.
Let me say, Commissioner Warner, I'm sorry, not Commissioner Warner, Mr. Warner. I closed the public hearing in the error because we still had questions. So let me pull that back, and we're still under the public hearing portion, so we can ask all the questions that we have. And we have Mr. Varner. I need to swear you in, correct, Mr. Warner?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, Mr. Varner, if you could raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that your testimony will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay. Consider yourself sworn in. Take it away.
So good morning, everyone. Bobby Varner with Pulte, the builder, the proposed builder on this property. With regard to the solar panel application, I can tell you that we typically do not offer it as an option to be purchased through Pulte. However, through our HOA documents, we usually allow it for home buyers and homeowners to come to us after they've settled, and they can, at their own expense, go and install the solar panels themselves. And when it comes to the structural integrity of the homes and the roof pitch to allow said application, Yes, happens all the time, and we're fine on that front.
Okay, that's helpful. Let me ask you actually another detailed question that didn't come up that I typically ask on these sort of town developments. On the front door, it's hard to tell from like the lip that goes around the building frame on the units, but is it going to be wide enough? Basically, it's an inch that it needs to be around the door frame to support like the Nest or other kind of like doorbell devices that can go in. That would be the smart doorbells, because sometimes I've seen some developments where they're only half an inch, and it's too small. Even 3/4 of an inch is pushing it, because a lot of times it's like 0.78 inches to like 0.9 inches for these devices.
Sure. And as everyone on this call probably knows, it looks like pretty much every home that's being built these days, the homeowner does go and install a Nest. So we're very cognizant of that. And we have enough space for the application. And we haven't had any issue with that in the past.
Okay. All right. Thank you. The only other question I had, and this might punt back to Mr. Foreman or perhaps you, on the parks that we have, or the little, I forget what the term was in the report when we were just kind of revising them around. There's like 4 different areas that we have sitting benches around there. Nowhere in the staff report did I see anything about like a table or any kind of like area to eat. And I was thinking that in particular around the playground area, maybe converting one of those benches into some sort of a tabletop where kids could eat or have a picnic as they're at the playground, or maybe just slightly off of like the mulch, if you would have that kind of an option.
Thank you, Commissioner Dorner. We can look into that and possibly include and consider it as part of the certification, but I think you are correct. We don't have it right now.
Okay, so would you proffer then, are you proffering to look into that as a potential like substitution for the benches that are there?
Yeah, yes, Commissioner, we can proffer that. And we can work with staff during certification.
Okay, thank you. And that's it. That's it for me.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other commissioners' questions for staff or for the applicant? If not, then I will now close the public hearing. Actually, before I do that, Mr. Foreman, you have the final word. So anything that you want to say or add in conclusion?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to request approval of this detailed site plan.
Okay, thank you. With that, for the third time, this public hearing is truly closed. And commissioners, if there's no, I know, exactly. If there's no further deliberation, what is your pleasure on this item?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the findings of staff in addition to the revised findings as read into the record by the applicant, and noting the one correction by staff on page 18. And with that, approve DSP-22014, TCP2-002-2022-01, and AC-23006, along with the conditions as outlined in staff's report and as further modified by applicant exhibit number 1, and also add proffered conditioned by the applicant to look into possible tables in lieu of a bench or more. I would just ask that staff would work with legal and the applicant to get that language correctly stated.
I'm going to second, but I think you did include revised findings as well, right?
I did.
Okay. Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Vice Chair Bailey. Discussion? No discussion. I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
Vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Varner. Thank you, Mr. Foreman. Thank you, Mr. Shelley.
Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.
And we have our final item on our regular agenda. This is item 7, DSP 21032, detailed site plan 5801 Arbor Street property. This was continued from April 27, 2023. We have Ms. Lockhart, who will give the staff presentation, and we have Mr. Foreman again. I believe we do have somebody who signed up in opposition to speak on this one as well. Let's start with the staff. Ms. Lockhart, take it away.
All right. Okay. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the Planning Board. For the record again, I am Dominique Lockhart with the zoning section. Item number 7 on the agenda is detailed site plan DSP-21032 titled 5801 Arbor Street property. This is an application to add a use to the table of uses in the Cheverly Sector Plan overlay. The zoning ordinance allows the district council to approve a change in the list of allowed uses in a DDO zone, otherwise known as a development district overlay zone. When making a request to add a use to the table of uses, the applicant is required to submit either a detailed site plan or a conceptual site plan. The planning board is then required to make a recommendation to the district council on the request to change the list of allowed uses. The proposed use in this instance is wholesaling or distribution of food and beverage materials. The additional backup includes a memo from the Town of Cheverly Planning Board dated May 2nd in support of the subject application. Next slide, please. The subject property shown in red is in Planning Area 69 in Council District 5. Next slide, please. More specifically, the subject site outlined in red is located on the south side of Arbor Street, approximately 250 feet west of its intersection with 59th Avenue. In addition, the site is less than a half mile from the Town of Cheverly limits to the east. Next slide, please. The image to the left shows that the subject site is located in the Local Transit Oriented Core, or LTOC zone. The image to the right shows the subject site was previously located in the Mixed Use Infill, or MUI zone. Next slide, please. The subject application is utilizing the prior ordinance, and as such, the property is in the Mixed Use Infill DDO zone within the Cheverly Sector Plan and SMA. Next slide, please. The topography map shows the site contains moderate slopes throughout the property. Next slide. This slide shows the master plan rights-of-way in the vicinity of the site. To the north is Arbor Street, which is an industrial roadway. To the south is John Hanson Highway, which is a master planned freeway. Further east of the site is Bellevue Avenue and Columbia Park Road, which are classified as primary and collector roadways. Next slide. The aerial photograph shows a closer view of the site. The site is currently operating with a wholesaling and distribution warehouse, along with a contractor's office with outdoor storage. Next slide, please. The proposed development plan shows the removal of the existing contractor's office with outdoor storage from the property. The building housing the wholesaling and distribution use will remain as is. Next slide, please. This is a photograph showing the front of the existing building. Next slide. This is a photograph showing the side of the building. Next slide, please. This is a photograph showing the rear of the building where the outdoor storage yard currently exists. Next slide, please. The site is currently, okay, first let me start, my apologies. Staff is recommending disapproval of the requested use and correspondingly denial of the detailed site plan for the following reasons. The site is currently operating as a wholesaling and distribution warehouse, along with a contractor's office with outdoor storage. Per the Prince George's County Department of Permitting, Inspections, and Enforcement, there are no prior permits issued that allow these uses. Therefore, the existing uses are operating without approval or authorization. The applicant has pursued use and occupancy permits to validate the existing uses. These permits are not approved and are currently on hold due to non-compliance with the Development District Overlay Standards, as the uses are not permitted. The requested use of wholesaling and distribution of food and beverage materials is also not permitted in the underlying MUI base zone. For comparison, the use is as well not permitted in the current LTOC zone. The district council, the planning board, and the community invested a significant amount of time creating the DDO zone standards and uses for the greater Cheverly sector plan and SMA area. Ignoring these strategies and permitted uses as adopted would go against the community's wishes and land use vision for the area. All sector plans go through an intensive public process, which helps promote a clear vision and plan that can be implemented for the benefit of the community. The approved desired uses and building standards were inserted to obtain the plan's vision over time. Staff cannot support uses that are contrary to the plan's vision as stated. In addition, the applicant's request to add the wholesaling and distribution warehouse of food and beverage materials eliminates the opportunity to attract mixed-use development to the property as recommended and outlined in the sector plan. In conclusion, staff recommends that the planning board adopt the findings of the staff report and recommend to the Prince George's County District Council disapproval of the applicant's request to permit wholesaling, distribution, and related storage of food and beverage materials, and disapprove the corresponding detailed site plan. This concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lockhart. Commissioners, any questions for staff? No questions. Thank you, Ms. Lockhart. We will turn to the applicant, Mr. Foreman. This is an evidentiary hearing as well. So we're requiring those intending to provide testimony to take an oath. Before you go, Mr. Foreman, I am going to do this. If there are members of your team, I don't know if there are any members of your team who expect to speak. I believe we also have representatives in the town of Cheverly, and we may have somebody signed up to speak as well. Nicole Neese or Nice. Are you folks here? Are you online? If so, can you either speak or bring yourself up on camera?
Nicole Neese is online.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Neese. Anyone else? Do we have a representative from the town of Cheverly?
Yes.
We do, Mr. Galloway. Great. Anyone else we have to speak on this? Mr. Foreman, anyone else from your team?
No, it's just me for my team this morning. For the
Thank you,
record.
Mr. Foreman. Thank you. So, Mr. Galloway and Ms. Neese, if you could both raise your right hands. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that your testimony will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, consider yourself both sworn in. And now I will turn to Mr. Foreman. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning again. For the record, Nate Foreman with the offices of O'Malley, Miles, Nyland, and Gilmore in Greenbelt. It's my pleasure to be here again and to speak on behalf of the applicant. I want to begin by talking about the sector plan. Ms. Lockhart had mentioned that, approval of this detailed site plan would be against the intent and the purposes of the DDOZ. However, unfortunately, the existing situation has shown that while a noble goal, the actual intent and situation has maybe not necessarily been carried forward or been successful. This property was rezoned MUI DDO through the 2005 Tuxedo Road sector plan. And the planning goals and principles were supported and carried again forward in 2018 through the Greater Cheverly sector plan. Since the adoption of the Tuxedo Road sector plan nearly 18 years ago, there has been one detailed site plan for development in this whole area. And that was actually just for an existing use to continue as it did under the existing zoning, the prior zoning before the enactment of the MUI DDO. So while there was a lot of time, expense, and energy put towards the production of these MUI DDO, I think there is some concerns and issues with how it actually is working to benefit this area. And that perhaps the mixed use vision that was espoused by the original 2005 Tuxedo Road plan and the continued forward with the 2018 Greater Cheverly plan is still noble and should be achievable, but perhaps it needs to have more flexibility and to what that actually means in today's market. So, I do respect the time and effort that Ms. Lockhart had put into her staff report, but I have to disagree with the recommendation and would request that this board approve this detailed site plan, which would allow wholesaling or distribution of food or beverage materials used or produced on the premises. When this matter was first scheduled for a hearing in December of 2022, our DSP then sought to approve uses that would allow the two existing tenants to remain at 5801 Arbor Street, Soda Bar Systems and Kiramonte Construction. Soda Bar is a small business that has been operating in the Washington metropolitan area since 1948 and produces and distributes beverage dispensing systems, equipment, bag and box syrups for sodas and juices. Kiramonte Construction uses the property for office space and the storage of vehicles and construction materials and equipment. Since that first December hearing and 4 continuances later, the revised application before you today is the result of extensive negotiations and communications with the town of Cheverly, including but not limited to 3 meetings with the mayor and city council for the town of Cheverly, 3 presentations before the town of Cheverly Planning Board, and numerous informal meetings with the town of Cheverly representatives. And through these discussions and meetings, a few things have become clear. Perhaps most importantly, a contractor's office with outdoor storage is incongruent with the type of development that the town wished to see along Arbor Street and the visions espoused by the sector plans for the Arbor Street Tuxedo Road area. Hence, in the revised application, that use has been removed. So we're no longer requesting contractor's office with outdoor storage. Second, Soda Bar specifically, and wholesaling or distribution of food or beverage materials used or produced on the premises, generally does not impair the development of Arbor Street into a pedestrian-oriented Main Street. Soda Bar brings a mixture of office and production workers to the area every day, something that in today's climate is not necessarily true of general offices or brick and mortar retail stores. Thus, allowing Soda Bar to continue to operate would contribute to the number of people along Arbor Street during any given workday or weekday. Third, as I mentioned, Soda Bar is a small business, and usually, small businesses help bolster the Main Street feel of an area, and specifically in this case, Arbor Street. And not to mention, its continued operation will contribute to the overall character of the area compared to a vacant or boarded up building, which is unproductive. Moreover, given its operations, it has little impact in the area in terms of traffic or when viewed from the street. As Ms. Lockhart showed on the slide, a lot of the outdoor storage and clutter was from Kiramonte Construction, which will be removed. And finally, if Soda Bar were to vacate the premises, approval of this DSP for this use would allow potential future other users, such as a coffee roastery, a bakery, distillery, or microbrewery, to occupy the premises. And I bring up these potential future uses not just as mere puffery, but actually because in order to obtain the town's support, my client agreed and has executed a covenant with the town of Cheverly that mandates the sale of the property upon him receiving a bona fide offer to purchase the property for its fair market value. As I said, this covenant has been signed by both the town and my client and is ready to be filed among the land records. And this covenant is a promise from my client to the town and to the county that approving this detailed site plan would not obstruct any future redevelopment of the property or forfeit changes to the area. It's a hold actually on the redevelopment that no other property has. And in the meantime, it will remain a productive business that does not impair the 2005 Tuxedo Road Arbor Streets Cheverly Metro Sector Plan or the 2008 Greater Cheverly Sector Plan. And with that, I would like to reiterate my request that the planning board approve this request for detailed site plan, and I would be more than happy to answer any questions that the chair or the board may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Foreman. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Foreman at this point? We certainly will have the opportunity to ask more questions as we hear from the town and from other folks.
Mr. Chair, I just have one, and it wasn't clear to me. So is this a situation where those businesses were operating without a permit?
Yes, Commissioner Giraldo. So this property dates back to about 1972 when it was first constructed. You saw how it was built. It was built to be utilitarian and serve warehousing distribution uses in an area that has operated as light industry, heavy commercial, basically ever since the 70s with vehicle storage, auto body shops and kind of the like. So my client bought this property in 2015 after the roof had been burned by a fire. He bought the property, fixed up the roof, and thought he was making a good investment. He looked around at the area, and once again, caveat emptor, but he saw that all of these industrial uses were around. This building wasn't clearly meant to be for industrial use. Why should he not be able to use industrial uses or have industrial tenants? So after he fixed up the building, he then, put it out for lease. He was approached by some body shops, some vehicle emissions places, and he didn't want to be dealing with automotive and this type of, pollutants that those cause. So he was able to bring in these two tenants that, one was basically storing materials on the outside of the property and having some administrative office inside. And the other was the relocation of Soda Bar after there was some family squabbles and they had to vacate the premises, which was a little bit farther north. So it's sort of a roundabout way of Commissioner to say, yes, my client has been operating this property with these tenants when he shouldn't have, but that's why we're going through this process to try to remedy that, given all these other facts and situations. And basically we started this process before the pandemic, but things really got put on hold with communications between the town of Cheverly, my client, DPI. So that way we finally find ourselves here, how many years, 4 years later after we started the process. So unfortunately, it's been much longer than we wanted it to be, but we have been trying to remedy the situation after we got it under control. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. No further questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Giraldo. Any other questions for Mr. Foreman at this point?
I just want to ask, what happens if there is a disapproval? If we were to go with staff recommendations, would your current tenants then have to move out immediately because of DPI enforcement, or would they be allowed somehow to continue within there, and then whenever they were to change over, you would have to find a different kind of use and occupancy?
Thank you, Commissioner Dorner. Disapproval would mean the tenants have to be evicted immediately. DPI has been, I will give them credit, they've been very patient as we go through this process, but following this decision, we will need to take action immediately, whether we're allowed to keep one of our tenants or whether one has to be removed immediately. And given my client's inability to find other tenants, because if we could find a tenant that was permitted under the table of uses, that we would have no problem. He would be fine going that route. The problem is he just hasn't been able to find any tenant interested in leasing the site that would be permitted otherwise.
And I assume he hasn't done kind of like market analysis to see whether or not he could sell the property under one of the permitted uses.
I don't know if he's done a market study, but we have had potential vendors recommended by the city of Cheverly, the town of Cheverly, to come look at the space and see if they are interested in it. And that just had, because if that happened, we could withdraw this DSP and be happy and be good. But unfortunately, that just never went anywhere.
Sure. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
One follow-up question, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Foreman. Just to clarify, you said if our act, and this is my question, that our action would not impact or require immediate eviction, because all we're doing is recommending an action to the district council. So do you mean planning board action or district council action?
My apologies. Thank you. Yes, district council action. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Resolution of this entire detailed site plan, but yes, thank you.
Okay,
I think I'm just a holdover from my earlier meeting where that was going to be like most of the final action, or felt like it.
Fair enough. Other questions for Mr. Foreman? All right, let me go to the speakers. Let me start with the town of Cheverly. We have Mr. Galloway.
Yes.
All right, if you could introduce yourself for the record, and the floor is yours.
Will do. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dwayne Galloway. I am the town administrator for the town of Cheverly. Mr. Foreman has been correct. He has done extensive, he's met extensively with the planning board, the Green Infrastructure Committee, and the town of Cheverly. So the town has no reason to oppose this. In fact, Mr. Foreman was also correct. We have signed a declaration of covenant to ensure that this matter could potentially move forward. The mayor and council voted on this in favor to support this matter moving forward. So that is pretty much all that I have. We do support the proposal on the table right now.
Thank you, Mr. Galloway. Appreciate that. Any questions for Mr. Galloway? No questions. We have Ms. Neese, Nicole Neese.
Hi,
You could introduce yourself for the record, and the floor is yours.
Hi, my name is Nicole Neese. I'm a resident on 59th Avenue and also the president of the Cheverly West HOA, which is also on 59th Avenue and is within 0.2 miles of the business in question. So a couple of statements. We did want to make it clear, if it hasn't been clear to the council, that this building is not within the town of Cheverly. It's actually located closest within 0.2 miles of the Cheverly West HOA. We have discussed this proposal at our last HOA meeting and unanimously agreed that we would not want to see this request approved. There's several reasons for this. Within the last year, 3 doors down from this business, we have seen one building that was vacant turn over, become a restaurant, the first restaurant in this area under this new zoning, and it is thriving. So for us, it is a sign of things to come. This is a metro adjacent area. I think it's a shame that within 0.2 miles of the metro, it's an industrial area, and it's not the vision of community friendly businesses that I think was the intent of the Cheverly sector plan, which goes beyond the town of Cheverly. There also in the last few months, at least 2 other properties that are now for sale. If you look at their for sale links online, it states that these businesses are for sale under the new zoning. I think if we approve an adjustment to the current zoning, it's going to set a dangerous precedent where these businesses that are slowly starting to turn over into more community-friendly businesses are going to see that, well, maybe I don't have to do this anymore. We can stick to the same old, take a cue from what's going on with this business, and we're going to continue to be storage facilities, warehouse distribution facilities, and quite frankly, facilities that aren't attractive to community adjacent properties that are adjacent to neighborhoods. And with the new development of Hospital Hill in Cheverly, this is going to bring more units, more people, more interest to the Cheverly area, and having community-friendly businesses adjacent to the metro is an important part of overhauling this metro area, which has sadly been lacking. The Cheverly sector plan was years in creation, so I think to start to change that after the fact because of this one business would be a terrible decision for what we want to see in this area as a whole. I'm see if there's anything else. I think to say that the planning for the Tuxedo area Cheverly sector plan, to call that a failure is premature. I mean, we just got our first restaurant within the time frame of when this was first proposed. And seeing that there's other businesses that are slowly turning over, I think we'd be taking a step in the wrong direction to approve this proposal. So I will pause there and see if there's any questions, but we unanimously disapprove this. We are adjacent to this building. I can literally see this building from my window right now as I'm speaking. And we just hope that the council would take the staff recommendation into consideration and disapprove this proposal.
Thank you, Ms. Neese. Appreciate that. Commissioners, any questions for Ms. Neese? Okay, thank you very much. We have no one else who signed up to speak for this. I will turn to the applicant for the final word. Any rebuttal and close, Mr. Foreman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just real brief. In response to one of the comments Ms. Neese made about the restaurant, if she's referring to, I believe it's the Oasis restaurant, which is more on Tuxedo Road, that actually had been a restaurant previously. So that was sort of continued over as a non-conforming use. It wasn't really the establishment of a restaurant in a former industrial building. It was the establishment of a restaurant in a former restaurant building. Otherwise, I do want to say, I think this is just very unique and peculiar to this property and the type of tenant that we're looking to see and the request we're making of this board. I don't think it's going to open the floodgates, especially with the new processes under the zoning ordinance, which don't really allow amendments to table of uses. So I think this is very isolated to this one property and basically to this one tenant. And I also don't think that this type of tenant and this type of use that we're requesting does significantly impair the Tuxedo Road, the intent of the Tuxedo Road sector plan or the Greater Chevrolet sector plan, because I don't believe that this type of business is inherently against what could be a Main Street property, a Main Street area. Thank you very much. I do request approval.
Thank you, Mr. Foreman. With that, I will close the public hearing portion, hopefully this only time for this case. And under deliberation, let me start, commissioners, just to say that I have some sympathy for the property owner here. And the bottom line is for me is that our recommendation has to find that the requested use conforms to the purposes and recommendations of the sector plan and the development district plan. I don't see how allowing this use would do that. So I certainly don't think it's time to give up on the development district overlay plan of the sector plan. So as we start our deliberation, let me just say that I'm inclined to follow staff recommendation on this, even if I have some sympathy for the property owner. So let me turn it to you all, fellow commissioners, and see what your thoughts are and where you are with this.
So, Mr. Chair.
Similarly, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr.
No, I concur with the chair. I mean, this is just the beginning of a development of that area. And they have a vision. And I know staff and the community was very much involved. And I feel, sympathy for the property owner as well, but we have to personally, I think we need to take a long-term view. And I know Chevrolet has been wanting to have those types of facilities, walk-in restaurants, some pedestrian friendly, and this would just be counter to it. So I concur in the chairman's comments.
And I was only going to add, and I will now just associate myself with both of your comments, and also extending my empathy to Mr. Foreman and your client. But I just didn't hear anything that was not as convincing as, quite frankly, the very thoughtful and thorough analysis I thought staff did. So.
Thank you, commissioners. Any other comments, questions under deliberation? Commissioner Joyner, Vice Chair Bailey, anything else?
I align with the other commissioners with what the other three have said so far. It pains me to do that in some way, because I don't like to see small businesses, particularly local businesses, do that. And I like the idea of having a brewery or a coffee shop or whatever, because I've got both of those right down the street from me. And I know that they're not like eyesores once they get started, like they're fantastic ways to spur economic development. And are other sort of examples of local entrepreneurs kind of making successes along the way. But I think it is problematic that we have the maps that have been approved and the plans that have been approved and the new zoning ordinance. And we made great strides to kind of go that way. I wish there was a different condition under which we're finding ourselves so I could support this, because I would absolutely want to have the tenants remain and do these kinds of things so we don't lose jobs and have other people hurt in different ways. I just find it difficult to go against what the staff has said, and the caller who testified as well, I think just made very good pointed remarks on the issue. And unfortunately, it just doesn't go the way that like my heart would want it to go for when I hear Mr. Foreman, because when I hear the other people, it's like, well, my heart goes the other way. And the things that we're bound by are just different from which I would sometimes out of emotion want to vote in that direction.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Commissioner. Vice Chair Bailey, anything to add?
I don't have anything to add. I just want to associate myself with the comments made by Mr. Chair and my colleagues.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I would say that as we wrap up, I would agree that I think that Mr. Foreman had a pretty thoughtful, articulate, full-throated endorsement for this and rationale for it, and I was taken by that. And I'm also mindful that the town of Cheverly was open to compromise on this too. But I think staff's rationale for this was crystal clear, and I think that Ms. Neese actually helped as well to hear her view on that. And one thing she mentioned that really caught my attention too is the new Cheverly Hospital site development, which, that's a significant enough development and close enough to this where it really could help change the market a bit. So I'm mindful of that as well. But the bottom line is I think staff's recommendation makes sense to me. And so it sounds like that's where we are. So if there's no further deliberation, commissioners, I would look for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the findings of staff and recommend to the district council disapproval of the applicant's request to permit wholesaling, distribution, and related storage of food and beverage materials products, and as well as subsequently disapprove DSP-21032.
Second.
A motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Commissioner Giraldo. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I will call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Dorner.
Vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 5-0 for disapproval. Thank you, Mr. Foreman. Thank you, Ms. Lockhart. Thank you, Ms. Neese. Thank you, Mr. Galloway. Mr. Hunt, I believe that concludes all items for today's agenda. Any other business before us, Mr. Hunt?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. No additional business items before the planning board today.
Good answer, Mr. Hunt.
Good answer, Mr. Hunt. So with that, commissioners, without objection, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of the day.
Have a good weekend.